The objective of this video is to define progressivism and the goals of progressivism. Really, to understand progressivism, you have to think back to the Gilded Age and what happened during the Gilded Age and what made the Gilded Age bad. Think of the tenements, the long working hours, the low wages, the horrible working conditions. The progressive era is going to find ways to fix these problems. And that is it the role of the government to fix these problems, and members of, or those that push for progressive movements, believe that it truly was the role of the government. Progressivism was an effort aimed to restore economic opportunity so that everyone had the opportunity to make money, to make a living, and correct injustices in American life. So this could be women not having the right to vote, poor working conditions, not having an equal voice in government. All of those things are going to be addressed by the progressive movement. So there are going to be four main goals of the progressive movement. The first one that I want to talk about is protecting the social welfare, the social goodness of people. The people who pushed for the progressive movement, they wanted to soften the harsh conditions that had existed during the Gilded Age. The rough life of immigrants, of working conditions, all of those things. We talked about the social gospel, and that you're really going to see that kind of starting as part of during the progressive movement, that by doing good things, you're a good person. So one of the people we talked about was Jane Addams and the creation of the settlement houses, hers in particular in Chicago, the Hull House, where she educated immigrants to give them a fair chance at being successful in the United States. Another organization that you're going to see as part of this protecting the social welfare in the progressive era is the YMCA, known as the Young Men's Christian Association. They're going to open libraries, sponsor classes, build swimming pools, build handball courts, anything that could promote the welfare of society. You also have the creation of the Salvation Army. They fed the poor in soup kitchens. They cared for children in nurseries. They created things known as slum brigades, where they would teach poor immigrants in middle class values of hard work and temperance. Temperance is abstaining from the use of alcohol. One person that really is part of this social welfare, protecting the social welfare, is a woman named Florence Kelly. She had worked at the Hull House in Chicago, like I said, which was a settlement house earlier. She was an advocate for children and women, and she helped with the passage of the Illinois Factory Act of 1893, which prohibited child labor and limited women's working hours. This act would become the model for other states as we move through the progressive era. The second goal of the progressive era that I want to discuss is to promote moral improvement. Morality, not the workplace, was key to improving the lives of poor people. As part of this moral improvement, they're going to push for prohibition, which is making the sale and consumption of alcohol illegal. You have organizations such as the Women's Christian Temperance Union. It was founded in 1874. It spearheaded the Prohibition Crusade. They entered saloons singing and praying and urging saloon keepers to stop selling alcohol. You also, one of the more famous women that were part of the moral improvement as part of the prohibition aspect of it was Carrie Nation. Carrie Nation would carry around a hatchet, would go into bars and bust bottles with her hatchet. And she was arrested 30 times for her actions, and she would even sell her hatchets as souvenirs for when she would go into these saloons. The third goal is to create economic reform. People during the Gilded Age began to question capitalism, and as part of the progressive movement, they're going to try to change some of the aspects of capitalism. Some people of the progressive era felt that only the rich were getting rich and the poor were getting poorer. The rich weren't working as hard as the poor were working, that kind of thing. Some of the people at this time are going to turn to socialism, just some of them. You also have the muckrakers that play a huge role in economic reform. Muckrakers were journalists who reported on the bad things that were going on to society and brought those to light so that they could be fixed or undone. The fourth goal is to foster efficiency, the use of data by social scientists, high cost of working long hours on individual and society. So through this fostering of efficiency, they said actually it's not good to work a lot of hours or overwork someone because then their productivity goes down. And so they start using what scientific management in order to make the most that they can. The scientific management was breaking manufacturing tasks into simpler parts and to see how quick it could be done. They want to improve efficiency and productivity. A great example of this fourth goal is going to be Henry Ford and the development of the assembly line to use to make the automobile, which you will learn about in the next module. Now, the next few slides that we go through are going to just kind of be things that you have to memorize as we go through these different amendments. The first amendment that I want to talk about is the 16th Amendment, which was ratified in 1913. Lower tariff rates, so had to get more money somewhere. So a tax on imported goods, a tariff, those had been lowered, so they had to get money somewhere. So the 16th Amendment creates a federal income tax. The 16th Amendment creates a federal income tax. Make sure you know that. Also created a graduated tax. Larger incomes were taxed at a higher rate than smaller incomes. At the time it was ratified in 1913, it was a 1 to 6% tax on the income. If you have time and if you want to look a little bit more about the effect that the federal income tax had on the United States, you can look in your textbook on page 334 and look at a graph and kind of look at how things changed. Now, again, something that you're also going to just have to memorize as part of the progressive movement is the ratification of the 17th Amendment. This was also ratified in 1913, so you have the direct election of state senators. Direct election of state senators right here with the ratification of the 17th Amendment. That senators shall be elected by the people of each state rather than by the state legislatures. Before, it's kind of hard to believe because that's all you are familiar with are people just electing their senators. But before that, state legislators would appoint or elect the senators that would represent the state in D.C. Where we talked about in the Gilded Age, where the government was really helping big business because big business would give them a kickback and everyone, well, not everyone, but big business and government officials were making money a lot from some of these things going on during the Gilded Age. You're going to start to see a lot of reform in government at the state and local levels. I want to talk about one person in particular, Robert M. La Follette, also known as Fighting Bob. He is going to be from the state of Wisconsin, and he's going to serve 3 terms as governor. And his job is to take on big business. He did not mean to smash corporations, but merely drive them out of politics. That idea of business and government working together that we saw in the Gilded Age, Fighting Bob or Robert La Follette wanted to end that. His major target was going to be the railroad. He taxed the railroad property at the same rate as other businesses instead of giving railroad companies a break like other government representatives had. Robert La Follette said, no, I'm going to teach you the same as everyone else, and he taxed them the same. He also set up a commission to regulate rates, and he forbade the railroad to issue free passes to state officials in order to get them to vote in their favor. So again, you see with this progressive movement, a change, a challenge, a call for a difference than what had existed during the Gilded Age. So what you see on this screen right here are just vocabulary words that you need to be familiar with. And just memorize them. The first one is initiative, and this is a bill or a law that starts with the people rather than the lawmakers. So in the progressive era now, you can have people come up with their own laws, and they can take it to be passed as a possible law rather than just lawmakers. You have then a referendum. Voters accepted or rejected the initiative, so people could vote on whether or not they approved a new law. You also have a recall. This enabled voters to remove public officials from elected positions by forcing them to face another election. Probably the most recent recall would be the recall in 2003 of Gray Davis out of California. He was elected the governor of California, and the people were so unhappy with him they actually recalled him. It was the first in California history. 55.4% of votes in favor of his recall. And at that point, that's when Arnold Schwarzenegger became governor of California. So recall is anytime the populace is unhappy with a government official, they can recall them. You also have a primary. In 1899, Minnesota passed the first mandatory statewide primary system, and this enabled voters, instead of political machines, to choose candidates for public office through a special popular election. Think of the primary that you're most familiar with is probably the presidential primary, where prior to a presidential election, you have several Democrats and several Republicans who want to be president of the United States. And then Republicans in the United States vote on the Republican they want to run, and Democrats vote on the Democrat they want to run. This is a primary.